In this lesson, we'll start to talk about some of the different light parameters that are available inside of 3ds Max. Okay, so in this scene, we're going to be going back to this sort of a aircraft, and really we won't be doing anything just incredibly detailed with this. We'll just sort of use this to play around and sort of get a feel for the different lights inside of this application. So just like we looked at in our previous lesson, we're going to drop in a light by first going into our Create tab. Let's go over Create Lights. In this case, we're going to switch over to the standard lights, and let's drop in something like an Omni light. So let's first switch over. I'm going to go back to a 4-panel view here. There we go. That'll make it a little bit easier for us to work. Let's go in and set up an Omni light, and we'll just sort of click once up here. And when I'm done adding in that light, I'm going to right-click to go out of this creation mode, and now I can come in here and select the light and work with it however I want. So I can come in, let's say I wanted to pick up that light and maybe move it around. We can now pick that up and move it from side to side, front to back, whatever the case may be. Okay, so let's come in. If we want to now make some changes to this light with this light selected, we can now just go into our Modify tab, and let's just take a look at a few of these options. So the first thing we have is the ability to just simply turn that light on or off. So if you had several lights in your scene, you could actually animate lights turning on or off if you choose to. We could actually change light from one light type to any other light type. So if I wanted to change this, maybe to a spotlight or a directional light, we could definitely do that. So in my case, though, I'm just going to leave this as an Omni light. We do have the ability to add shadows to this light. By default, whenever you create a light inside of 3ds Max, it won't have any shadows. So if you wanted to turn that on, you certainly could. We'll talk a little bit more about shadows here in the next couple of lessons. So if you want to go ahead and turn that on, you're welcome to. We'll, like I said, talk a little bit more about shadows and just how those work in one of our next lessons coming up here in the next few minutes. So if we wanted to do things like maybe change this light's color or change the strength of that light, that's going to be found here in this Intensity Color Attenuation rollout. So let's click on that. And the first thing we have is this multiplier with a color swatch next to it. So this color swatch is indicating the color of the light that's being emitted from this light source. So maybe if I wanted something that is maybe a little bit more of a blue light, I can switch that. You can see now this light is emitting, instead of white light, it's going to emit sort of a blue light. If we wanted this light to maybe be a little bit more yellowish or red in color, we could change that, and immediately that change should be reflected here in the viewport. Okay, so we have that control. We also have this multiplier, which is just a very, very simple intensity control. So if we wanted the light to be maybe a little softer, we could start to drop that intensity down, maybe to something like 0.1, and now that light is much weaker. So this could be used to create sort of secondary illumination. If you had multiple lights in your scene, you probably wouldn't want them all to be the exact same intensity. You'd probably want a couple of lights to be stronger or brighter than others. So that's where you can start to control the strength of your lights, is through this multiplier. Below that, we also have the ability to introduce a type of decay into our lights. So in the real world, as you set up some kind of a light source, or as you turn on a light, the closer you get to that light, the more intense the light becomes. And then as you start to move further and further away from that light source, the light energy becomes less and less. Well, that's really not the way that things work by default inside of 3ds Max. What's happening right now is that the objects that are very close to this light source receive the exact same amount of illumination as objects that are very far away. In other words, there is by default no decay on our lights. So that may be good for some situations, but really that's not physically accurate. That's not the way that things behave in the real world. So what we could do is introduce a type of light decay. We have inverse, which you can see will actually make this light start to decay as we get further away from it. We also have an inverse square. Now this is actually the way that light behaves in the real world. It follows this inverse square fall off. So you can see once again these objects that are going to be very close to your light source. You can see these are very nicely illuminated. As we start to move further away, you can see these areas don't receive as much illumination. In this area, down below where it says Start, we can basically choose how far out that light decay begins. So right now, this area should receive a pretty uniform amount of illumination, and then once we start to cross outside of this little blue sphere, that's where our light will start to decay. So we can come in here and set that maybe a little bit closer or a little bit further away, depending on just our particular lighting situation. So sometimes if you come in here and start to set this start distance fairly low, you will probably need to come in here and counteract that by starting to increase your multiplier. So it definitely takes a little bit of playing around in order to get this working properly, and sometimes it's really just a matter of artistic taste, what artistically you're trying to go for. So in my case now, we have a light source that's set up, pretty good illumination that is going to be pretty close to our light source, and then far away we receive very little illumination in those areas. Again, that is going to be fairly realistic and pretty close to how things behave in the real world. Alright, so those are some of the basic controls that we have as far as our 3ds Max light sources. And you'll find that pretty much all of your light sources have these basic controls for light type, shadow type, color, intensity, and attenuation. Now there are some more attributes. There's actually a lot more attributes further down. We're really not going to get into those in this particular course, but if you do want to learn more about these different types of lights and their different parameters, we do talk about these in quite a bit more depth in our Introduction to Lighting in 3ds Max course. So, like I've said before, if once you've had a chance to complete this course, and if you want to learn more about these lights, some of the other attributes that are found in here, you're definitely welcome to check out that course. So for now, that's a look at some of the basic light parameters found on 3ds Max lights.